When a horror film becomes a franchise and gets remade again and again, with many of the remakes becoming their own franchises, eventually you get some pretty odd versions. So it's only a matter of time before somebody does a comedy. Young Frankenstein is a comedy version of the classic tale, mostly spoofing the Universal films, directed by Mel Brooks. I'm a pretty big Mel Brooks fan, and I've seen his movies many times, and Young Frankenstein is one of the best. Not the best, that would be Blazing Saddles, but Young Frankenstein is damn funny. The movie was filmed in black and white, using equipment and filming techniques from the 1930s to make it look like one of the Universal pictures. Interestingly enough, the Universal series itself eventually became a self-parody of itself. After Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, and Ghost of Frankenstein, the series tuned more towards the monster mash genre, with Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, and House of Dracula, and then finally all-out comedy, with Bud Abbott and Lou Costello Meet Frankenstein. While that was more of a vaudeville and slapstick-style comedy, Young Frankenstein is more of an outright spoof. Not the type of tired bullshit spoofs you're used to these days, like date movie, or disaster movie, or porno movie, or whatever the fuck they have now, but a much more subtle and clever spoof, in the way that only Mel Brooks could really do. Gene Wilder stars as Victor Frankenstein's grandson, Frederick Frankenstein, though he tries to distance himself from his grandfather by insisting that his name is pronounced Frankenstein. This leads to a lot of great bits about his name, the best of which is when he meets Igor, clearly a takeoff of Bela Lugosi's character from Son of Frankenstein, who is so put off by the idea of saying Frankenstein that he makes the doctor call him Igor. Frankenstein, or Frankenstein or whatever, is teaching a class in anatomy, and one of his students keeps pestering him about his grandfather's work, which Frederick calls doo-doo, insisting that giving life to dead flesh is impossible, and his grandfather was a nut. This guy shows up with the will of Baron Frankenstein, though there's some confusion about this. Brooks meant for the will to be that of Frederick's father, but the guy refers to the will of his great-grandfather, leading people to think that it was actually Victor's will, which makes no sense, especially that Victor is his grandfather, not his great-grandfather. Anyway, Frederick leaves and says goodbye to his fiancée, who is hilarious, because she doesn't want to be touched in any way, so her makeup, clothes, and hair don't get ruined, so instead of a goodbye kiss or a hug, they just bump elbows. Frederick travels to Castle Frankenstein, which he now owns, and meets Igor and his grandfather's old girlfriend, Frau Bluche. Every time her name is said, the horses in the stables go nuts and start freaking out. It's hilarious. Even when they're indoors and they say her name, you can hear the horses freaking out in the distance. An interesting thing about this joke is Mel Brooks was working off of a mistranslation, that Bluche meant glue in German. But it was just bad information he got from someone else. It's still hilarious, though, one of my favorite running gags. Frederick is interested in finding his grandfather's textbooks, and in looking, as well as finding the source of strange music he hears in the night, finds his old laboratory. Or maybe I should say, laboratory. Frederick can't resist the pull of destiny, and after reading his grandfather's notes, decides it is possible to create life from dead flesh, and tries anyway. They put together a huge monster. There's a great running joke involving the creature's huge stature and the size of his Schwanzstücker, or to the layman, his cock. You gotta love Igor's thoughts on this. Oh, he's going to be very popular. Igor is easily the best and funniest character, played by the late great Marty Feldman. The way he just looks at the camera and as he makes certain jokes and just has this smart-ass look on his face, you gotta laugh. Anyway, they create the creature, Schwanzstücker and all, but Igor made the same mistake Fritz did in Frankenstein and dropped the correct brain and wound up taking an abnormal one. Though in this case he literally thought it was the brain of someone named Abby Normal. The creature is pretty typical, lumbering and stupid with a fear of fire, though Frankenstein attempts to teach him culture and demonstrates this to a group of scientists by having the creature dance and sing Putting on the Ritz. Or maybe I should say, this is interesting as the song itself makes me want to vomit in rage, but it's always hilarious to see the scene. The creature flips out when he sees some fire and everything goes haywire, leading to the typical part where everyone tries to kill the creature. In the end, Frankenstein winds up giving part of his own intellect to the creature, who runs off with Frankenstein's bitch of a wife or fiancée or whatever, while Frankenstein winds up with the creature's Schwanzstücker and his hot lab assistant. The movie's plot is pretty typical Frankenstein, but that's not why you see this. You see it for the laughs. So many of the jokes in this film are so classic that they've been repeated so often, people forget they're actually from this movie. Stuff like the walk this way gag has been used in so many cartoons, shows, and movies since, it even inspired an Aerosmith song, as some of the members went to see the movie and thought it was so hilarious that they told Steven Tyler they don't care what the lyrics he writes for their next single are about, but it has to be called Walk This Way. Things like the knockers joke when they first arrive at the castle, it's been co-opted by just about every other movie spoof that has come since. The performances shine also. Gene Wilder's usual dry wit, Marty Feldman's smug, smart-ass Igor, and the creature is played by Peter Boyle, who just can't seem to catch a break. There's spoofs of various scenes from the previous Frankenstein movies, my favorite of which is the sequence with the blind hermit, taken directly from Bride of Frankenstein, who tries to show the creature hospitality, but winds up burning his thumb, breaking his wine glass before he can drink it, and pouring hot soup on his crotch. There's also the little girl and the flowers from the original Frankenstein, and that ends very differently. Overall, if you like to laugh, and if you miss the days when spoof movies were clever and engaging, and not a clusterfuck of random jokes and references, you gotta check out Young Frankenstein. I give it a 9 out of a possible 10.